So the ongoing Apple Epic Games lawsuit has kicked up a few rocks within the gaming industry and uncovered some juicy secrets. For example, we now know the extent to which Sony absolutely hates cross-platform play. I mean, we all suspected this. For years, PlayStation has been the one kid on the playground who utterly refuses to play nice with others. Things have softened a little bit in recent times, but from the sounds of this court case, Epic effectively had to drag Sony kicking and screaming over to the other kids, and even then bribe them with big handfuls of cash to convince them to be polite without trying to bite anyone. According to email correspondence between the two companies, made public as evidence in the ongoing trial, Epic kept badgering Sony over a long period of time, and Sony was having none of it. Said Sony's Gio Corsi, "Cross-platform play is not a slam dunk no matter the size of the title. As you know, many companies are exploring this idea, and not a single one can explain how cross-platform play improves PlayStation business. Of course, as consumers, we all understand how cross-play is hugely beneficial. It breaks down arbitrary walls between platforms. It allows players to enjoy each other's company regardless of what devices we're using. It's great. The only time crossplay goes wrong is when a company, say Aspire Media, accidentally allows PC players, with their superior mouse-based aiming, to bully console players, whose controls just aren't as accurate. This kind of issue aside, crossplay is always great for consumers. It's less great for Sony, and I appreciate that. Yes, the company wants everyone to buy a PlayStation, but they also have another issue, which ties into this lawsuit. What if someone plays Fortnite almost exclusively on their PlayStation, for free, because it's a freemium game, but then uses their iPhone instead to purchase some delicious V-Bucks? Suddenly, Apple is getting a cut of the money instead of Sony. That's the problem. That's why Sony doesn't like crossplay. It's petty, but it makes a certain amount of sense from a business standpoint. So with that being the case, Epic got passive-aggressive. A representative said in one email, and I love their self-confidence here by the way, "I can't think of a scenario where Epic doesn't get what we want. Epic's not changing its mind on the issue, so let's just agree on it now." Epic proposed a bunch of incentives to get Sony on board. Epic would, quote, go out of its way to make Sony look like heroes, and would brand its E3 presence with PlayStation. Epic could potentially offer some exclusive items to PS Plus subscribers. And my personal favourite, Epic could give Sony an extended license for Unreal Engine 4, because the email notes, "I don't think I've mentioned this before, but your license to use UE4 expires in May 2019. That license has some of the best terms we've ever offered for UE4. Sure is a nice Unreal Engine 4 license you've got there, Sony. Would be a shame if something were to happen to it." I feel like this is an important time to point out that nobody is the good guy here. Sony is not the good guy, they're preventing crossplay because they want a big chunk of Fortnite revenue. Epic is not the good guy because they also want that same chunk of Fortnite revenue, hence the ongoing lawsuit, and they're not above threatening other companies to get their way. Apple certainly isn't the good guy either. They're also squabbling over that 30% revenue chunk and will straight up refuse to do business with Epic. Although considering the kinds of aggressive business practices that Epic is showing off here, I'm frankly not surprised that either Sony or Apple are less than thrilled about giving Epic what they want. So, still not interested, Sony rejects crossplay yet again. Finally, Epic is forced to meet Sony on their own terms, and those terms all have dollar bills in front of them. The lawsuit reveals that in order to agree to Fortnite crossplay, Sony requires Epic to pay them for any purchase that a primarily PlayStation Fortnite player makes on another device. So if you buy V-Bucks on your phone or the Epic Games Store but you primarily play on PlayStation, then Epic has to pay Sony a share of that money. Now, as I've said, I don't think we should take sides in this fight. That'd be like taking sides on Godzilla vs. Kong if you live in a penthouse in Wan Chai in Hong Kong. No matter who wins the fight, you're stuck footing the cleanup bill. That said, I have got to hand it to Sony for being so stubborn and belligerent that they force Epic to pay them money to allow crossplay. I'd admire this more if it weren't absolutely terrible for consumers. Because sure, Epic can afford to take a hit on this front. They're a huge multinational company with Tencent backing. They're going to be fine. But not every game studio can afford to pay Sony off to get crossplay on their platform. There are a lot of smaller games that would get a tremendous boon from a wider multiplayer base, but won't ever get that chance because Sony doesn't see a benefit to their bottom line. Sony can be quite mercenary with these kinds of decisions. It's become clear that for the most part, the company isn't interested in positive press as an incentive to make things better for players. That said, Sony did recently back down over closing the PlayStation 3 and Vita digital storefronts. It seems that the company can be persuaded, it just takes an enormous outcry from consumers to make it happen. And as nice as it is that they have been more flexible in recent months and that there is hope for the future, it's just exhausting. It shouldn't have to be an uphill struggle to get a basic consumer perk like cross-platform play. It's also unlikely that the smaller games that are most in need of the boost will be able to generate the groundswell necessary to make Sony back down whenever these issues come up in future. So like I say, as much as I think this incredibly petty squabble between Epic, Apple, Sony and everyone else involved is hilarious, I also recognise that nothing here is consumer friendly. There are no heroes in the world of big business. And on that cheerful note I end this video. Which faceless mega corporation do you personally stand for? Let me know in the comments.